Who wrote the Bible? It's one of those questions that lingers quietly in the back of many people's minds. Whether you've grown up hearing Bible stories in church or you've only just stumbled across its pages, at some point, the thought hits you. Who actually sat down and wrote these words? How did this book, made up of 66 different writings, across thousands of years, by dozens of different authors, in different languages, even come together in the first place? It's easy to see the Bible as a polished book on a shelf, printed, bound, and complete. But behind every verse, behind every story, is a human being. A person who lived, who breathed, who struggled, who believed. These weren't mythical figures. They were farmers, fishermen, kings, poets, prophets, and travelers. Some wrote in palaces, others wrote in prisons, some wrote in moments of peace. Others wrote in the middle of wars, exile, or great sorrow. Yet somehow, through all of that, they were connected. Not just by time or tradition, but by something deeper. They believed they were writing not just their own thoughts, but words inspired, breathed by God. And when you read the Bible with that in mind, everything changes. It's not just a collection of ancient texts. It becomes a living voice, a conversation, a letter addressed not just to a group of people long ago, but to you. This video isn't just about listing names and dates. It's a journey, a walk through deserts and temples, over mountains, and through the streets of Jerusalem. We'll meet the voices behind the words. We'll explore how the Bible came to be, how it was passed down through generations, how it survived attempts to destroy it, and how it continues to shape hearts, lives, and nations. You don't have to be a scholar. You don't need to know Hebrew or Greek. You just need curiosity. Because the story of who wrote the Bible isn't just about the past. It's about what it means for us today. So let's step into history, into faith, into mystery, and discover the incredible story behind the greatest book ever written. Section 1. The Old Testament. Roots of Faith. Long before anyone ever held a Bible in their hands, before paper and ink and printing presses, there were stories. Stories whispered under tents, spoken around campfires, passed from generation to generation. These weren't just tales for entertainment. They were sacred. They held identity, purpose, and a deep connection to God. The first part of the Bible we now call the Old Testament began with these stories. And at the heart of it all was a man named Moses. He was raised in Pharaoh's palace, but called by God to lead slaves to freedom. Through Moses, something began, something powerful. He didn't just lead a people out of Egypt. He laid down the foundation of a faith. Tradition tells us that Moses wrote the first 5 books of the Bible: Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy. Together, they're called the Pentateuch, or the Torah. In them, we find the creation of the world, the fall of humanity, the birth of a nation, and the laws that shaped Israel's identity. But Moses wasn't sitting with a laptop or a library of sources. He was a man in the wilderness, writing down the movement of God through history, through plagues and partings of seas, through commandments given on a mountain, through a covenant that would change the world. He didn't write for fame. He wrote because he had seen the fire of God and heard his voice. After Moses came others, scribes, priests, prophets, each carrying the story forward. Some wrote down the victories and failures of kings. Others recorded the songs of worship, laments of suffering, and wisdom about life's complexities. David, a shepherd who became a king, poured out his heart in the Psalms. Solomon, known for his wisdom, offered proverbs and reflections in Ecclesiastes and Song of Songs. Then came the prophets, men like Isaiah, Jeremiah, Ezekiel, and Daniel. They didn't write from comfort. Many were hated, threatened, or exiled, but they spoke and wrote because they believed the people needed to hear God's truth. Their words weren't soft. They challenged corruption, called for justice, and pointed to hope. Some of their visions were mysterious, others painfully clear. But all were rooted in the conviction that God had not abandoned his people. Even the smaller prophetic books, Amos, Micah, Malachi, carry thunder in few words. They remind us that sometimes the most powerful truths come from the margins. The Old Testament wasn't created overnight. It grew across centuries, a collection of voices echoing through time. Each book, each scroll, was a thread in a tapestry God was weaving. And through it all, there was one constant, the belief that these weren't just human ideas. These were divine messages, written through human hands. Section 2. The New Testament, the message of Jesus. Then everything changed. After centuries of waiting, of silence from the prophets, a new voice entered the story. Not just another prophet, not just another teacher, but someone who would change history forever. His name was Jesus. He didn't write a single book himself, not a gospel, not a letter. And yet, his life sparked the writing of the second half of the Bible, the New Testament. And it began with 4 unique accounts of his life, the Gospels of Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. Each gospel tells the same story, but from a different angle. Matthew, a former tax collector, wrote with the Jewish people in mind, showing how Jesus fulfilled the ancient prophecies. Mark, likely writing from Peter's perspective, gave a fast-paced, action-filled version of Jesus' ministry. Luke, a doctor and historian, was detailed and compassionate, highlighting the stories of the outcast and the broken. And John was the poet. He went beyond just the facts and explored the meaning behind it all, calling Jesus the Word who became flesh. These writers weren't inventing a legend. They were recording what they saw, what they heard, and what transformed them. After the resurrection, something powerful happened. Jesus' followers, who once hid in fear, began to preach with boldness. The movement grew. The message spread, and the writings continued. The book of Acts, written by Luke, tells the story of the early church, of miracles, persecution, and the unstoppable spread of the gospel. But it's the letters, or epistles, that truly reveal the heart and struggle of those early believers. Paul, once an enemy of Christians, became one of the most influential writers in the Bible. After encountering Jesus in a blinding vision, he went from persecutor to preacher, from hunter to healer, to... His letters to the Romans, Corinthians, Galatians, and others were not cold theology. They were passionate, personal, and powerful. He wrote to encourage, to correct, to remind people of grace, and to call them into deeper love and truth. Other writers joined the chorus. Peter, the bold disciple turned shepherd. James, the brother of Jesus with practical wisdom. Jude, warning about deception. And John again, this time with visions of heaven and eternity in the book of Revelation. These weren't random notes or private musings. They were letters that traveled between churches, copied carefully, and read aloud with reverence. They helped early Christians understand who Jesus was, what he had done, and what it meant to follow him. The New Testament wasn't written by theologians in ivory towers. It was written by fishermen, tent makers, travelers, and prisoners. By people who had walked with Jesus, or who had been radically changed by him. They didn't write to create a religion. They wrote because they couldn't stay silent. They had seen the light, and they had to share it. Section 3. Who really wrote it? So now we know the names. We've met the prophets, the poets, the apostles, the evangelists. But the deeper question remains, who really wrote the Bible? Was it just human authors, or was it something more? This is where the mystery and beauty of the Bible truly come alive, because while each book of the Bible has a human author, someone with a background, a personality, a voice, believers across centuries have held to this powerful truth. The Bible is God-breathed. That phrase comes from 2 Timothy 3:16. It means inspired, not in the way we're inspired by a sunset or a great song, but in the sense of divine guidance. God didn't take over people's minds like robots. Instead, He worked through them, through their culture, their language, their struggles, and their passions. Think of it like this. Imagine a symphony. Each instrument sounds different. Each musician plays with their own style. But when the conductor lifts the baton, they all come together to play one song. That's the Bible. Many voices. One message. But even after the writing, something amazing had to happen. Preservation. These words weren't stored in vaults. They were copied by hand, scroll after scroll, line after line, by people called scribes. They didn't have digital backups. A single mistake could mean starting over. And yet, with care, they copied and recopied, year after year. Monks in candlelit rooms, scholars in ancient libraries, they knew they were preserving something holy. What's even more astonishing is how accurate these copies remained. When the Dead Sea Scrolls were discovered in the 20th century, manuscripts over 1,000 years older than the previous oldest copies, they matched nearly word for word. It was a powerful confirmation that the Bible had been faithfully preserved across centuries. But the Bible as we know it wasn't assembled all at once. The early church had many letters and writings in circulation. Over time, they began to recognize which ones carried the unmistakable mark of truth, authority, and divine inspiration. This process is called canonization. It wasn't about a secret council picking favorites. It was about community, believers across cities and regions recognizing which books aligned with the teachings of Jesus and the eyewitnesses of His life. By the 4th century, church leaders affirmed the collection we now have, the 66 books of the Bible. The decision wasn't forced, it was confirmed. And so, the Bible was not written by just one person, nor preserved by accident. It was written by many, but guided by one. God used human hands to write divine truth. And through all the chaos of history, He protected it so that you and I could hold it in our hands today. Section 4. The Bible through the ages. The Bible didn't stop at parchment and scrolls. It traveled. It was read in synagogues, preached in homes, and carried by messengers on foot. As the message of Jesus spread across nations, so did the need for people to hear it in their own language. For centuries, the Bible was mostly in Hebrew, Aramaic, and Greek, the languages of its original authors. But as empires rose and fell, those languages faded from everyday use. The scriptures had to be translated, and that wasn't always easy or safe. In the 4th century, a scholar named Jerome translated the Bible into Latin, the common language of the Roman Empire. His work, called the Vulgate, became the standard Bible for over 1,000 years. But later, when Latin became a language of the elite, the Bible felt distant again, locked behind a wall of tradition and formality. Then came a wave of bold reformers, people like John Wycliffe in England and William Tyndale, who risked their lives to translate the Bible into the language of the people. They believed that everyone, not just priests or scholars, deserved to read God's word for themselves. Tyndale's translation became the foundation for the English Bible we know today. But he paid the price. He was betrayed, imprisoned, and eventually executed. His last words were a prayer: "Lord, open the King of England's eyes." God answered that prayer. In time, the Bible exploded in availability. The invention of the printing press in the 15th century by Johannes Gutenberg changed everything. For the first time in history, the Bible could be mass-produced. What once took months or years to copy now took hours. It was the dawn of a revolution, not just of religion, but of literacy, freedom, and access. And today, the Bible is the most translated book in the world. It's been rendered into over 3,000 languages, either in part or in whole. You can read it in a printed book, on a phone, on a tablet, even hear it spoken aloud by voices from every culture. But beyond the technical achievements, there's something more powerful: the way the Bible has shaped hearts. It has brought hope to prisoners, guidance to leaders, strength to the weak, and peace to the brokenhearted. It's been read in war zones and wedding altars, hospital rooms and hiding places. Through every age, ancient kingdoms, medieval times, the modern world, the Bible has endured. It's been banned, burned, and buried, but it keeps rising. It keeps speaking. Because it's not just a book, it's a voice. And somehow, across thousands of years, that voice is still whispering to you today. Conclusion: why it matters. So here we are. We've traveled across deserts with Moses, sat in palaces with Solomon, cried out in caves with David, walked with fishermen along the Sea of Galilee, stood in prison cells with Paul, and gazed into heaven through the eyes of John. We've asked the question, who wrote the Bible? And what we've found is that the answer isn't just about names or history. It's about something far deeper. Yes, the Bible was written by shepherds and kings, poets and prophets, tax collectors and teachers, but above all, it was written by people who encountered someone, so powerful, so real, that they had to write it down. They had to pass it on. That's what makes the Bible different from any other book. It doesn't just inform, it transforms. It doesn't just speak, it breathes. It doesn't just tell a story, it invites you into one. You see, the Bible isn't finished, not in the sense of its message. It continues in every life it touches, every person who opens it with honest questions, every heart that finds comfort in its promises, every soul that dares to believe that maybe, just maybe, the words on these pages were meant for them too. The Bible has been called a mirror, a sword, a lamp, a guide. But maybe, most of all, it's a letter. A love letter from a creator to his creation, from a father to his children, from God to you. So, what now? You don't have to be a scholar. You don't need all the answers. You just need to open the book, let it speak, let it stir something in you. Ask the questions, wrestle with the doubts, but don't ignore the whisper that says, "This is for you," because the same God who breathed life into these words is still breathing life into hearts today. And maybe, just maybe, he brought you here for a reason. Not just to learn who wrote the Bible, but to discover why it was written at all, for hope, for truth, for love, for you.